And here we go. Hello, and welcome to today's podcast or session of the Dead Man Walking podcast. I'm your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, author of the medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, because that's what happened to me, and that's why people call me Repeatedly Dead Fred. Today, I have the CEO of Lighthouse Credit Union, possibly, I think you're the newest credit union in Canada. Is that correct?
In Ontario.
In Ontario. And I find it an amazing story. And Michel Cubric is here to talk to us about how this happened and why it's so significant, and a little bit of family history, which I find interesting. So, Michel, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to talk to you a little bit about myself, but mostly about Lighthouse Credit Union and our journey, to be where we are today.
So maybe before we get to how you actually got licensed, can you talk about like how the concept of putting together a very targeted credit union, because I think you're targeted mostly towards the Jewish community, and we haven't seen that for a long time. I know there's the Steinbach Credit Union because I come from Winnipeg, and they also don't believe in charging interest, so the non-Mennonite members get an extra little premium on their returns because the Mennonite members aren't allowed to take that. So you're not exactly in the same situation, but how did this concept come to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, this is the belief, the desire of one man called Harley Gold, who is the chairman of the board of Lighthouse Credit Union. Harley has been in the financial services for many years, and he always believed that there was a need and a market for a financial institution geared towards the Jewish community. As you probably know, there's a large Jewish presence in the province of Ontario, primarily in the GTA. A lot of Jewish people in the financial services world, being very successful for other institutions. And Harley thought, why not collect some of this brain power and knowledge and expertise into one organization that will be geared towards, financial services for the Jewish community. So that is a Harley Gold idea.
Mm-hmm.
And he got together with a few people within the community, successful businessmen, business people, pitched the idea to see what the reception was going to be. Then they decided to put together a feasibility study that they hired one of the most reputable firms to do so. And when they got the feasibility study back, they realized that yes, this would be very well received. If I'm not mistaken, 80% of the respondents indicated that there would be interest in dealing with an institution such as Lighthouse. So armed with this information, they put this together and approached FSRA, the Financial Services Regulatory Agency of Ontario, and started the application to start a credit union. So that's how this whole thing started.
So what kind of timeline happened from when Harley had this brainstorm and he started trying to collect, assets and people?
Yeah, so I would say that this was a journey that took from late spring 2021
Mm-hmm.
until March of 2022, when FSRA actually issued the official certificate of approval. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say close to a year.
That's actually a lot faster than I thought something like this would have taken. Because,
You're right, Fred, but this speaks to the strength of the application. You are absolutely correct.
mhm.
Normally, things like this take a much longer time frame. But I would say, with no bias, that this is a direct correlation to the strength of the application. The board of directors that was put together, their reputation, their track record, the capitalization that the organization indicated it was going to have from day one. So when you
Mhm.
put all of this together, I think that was probably one of the key factors for the regulator to conclude the process in the timeline that it was concluded.
So in this application, was part of that that you were going to be CEO and that Alan was going to be the CRO, or did that
No,
happen after?
at that time, you have to indicate the roles that the organization will have to fulfill. You don't necessarily have to provide the names.
Mhm.
Um, but at some point in time prior to the application being completed, you must provide the names of senior management for the regulator. The regulator reserves the right to introduce themselves, call it, whatever you
Mhm.
want, ask questions. And obviously, they take that as one of the final components of their approval because senior management plays a significant role in the day-to-day management and in the overall running of the institution.
Mhm. So I know Alan Caro a little bit, and I know he was pretty successful at BMO. And I looked at your resume, and you obviously also had a very successful career. So what would make somebody like you or Alan choose to go to a much smaller, I guess, more nimble, less resourced institution and take the helm of something that I think it's pretty risky in this current economy to try a project like this.
It is, but I guess it talks about the space and time that both Alan and I are within our careers, right?
Hmm.
So Alan spent over 2 decades at BMO.
Hmm.
I spent over 2 decades combining with CIBC and a couple of other federally regulated institutions. And it
Hmm.
gets to a point in our careers that we have a choice. Either we can continue doing the same for the time that we have until we retire, just showing up and doing our jobs well, but it's not necessarily something that is truly exciting.
Hmm.
Or once in a lifetime comes an opportunity like this, where you can apply all the experience, all the knowledge, all the good things and the learnings you've got from the things that you tried in the past and have a blank page in front of you where you can actually write a brand new story. So I
Hmm.
think this is where my personality and Alan's personality align. We both like things like that. We were excited about this opportunity, and it's also undeniable that the emotional component
Hmm.
of participating in a financial organization that somehow would also impact the community was something that appealed to both him and I. Yes, there is the risk factor, but I tell you, Fred, in today's day and age, what is guaranteed anymore, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I've known colleagues that work for the same organization for 25, 30 years, and then one day they wake up, show up at the office, and thank you for your services. Goodbye.
Hmm.
So, you know what? It is risky, but we are excited about this. I think there's a lot of good things about Lighthouse that mitigate the risk of being a brand new financial institution in today's time. And if the first 9 months are any indication of what's lying ahead for us, we're very happy that we made the change.
Interesting. You just reminded me of a colleague, somebody you've probably come across, Randy Ambrosi, who
Uh-huh.
was a similar career path as yours and ends up as the commissioner of the CFL. You know,
Yes,
and
exactly.
I
Exactly.
guess for the same reasons, he just wanted to do something that was more meaningful to him at that stage of life. And I think
Absolutely.
for a lot of people that are going in career transition or think they're fighting ageism or whatever, um, it's a mindset you have to keep that there are opportunities out there for you where you can
Yeah, and
get
and it keeps
revitalized.
us young. It keeps us on
Hmm.
our toes. It also shows us that having been successful in another role in another organization doesn't equate to being successful in where we are now.
Mhm.
So it definitely is something that is refreshing, and it definitely keeps us, young, because we
Mhm.
can't simply say, you know what, we're going to do this because I did that over there and it worked. But the environment, at BMO, Allen, and at CIBC, where I came from, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people of supporting cast,
Mhm.
marketing, finance, HR, and you name it, right? And
Mhm.
here, Alan and I have to wear a number of different hats, right? Because we are much smaller, as you pointed out. So we jump in,
Mhm.
and not only we help with our experience, but more importantly, we also learn. Because I can tell you, with my 23 years of experience, this opportunity has given me so many learnings that I did not have and probably would not
Mhm.
have had
Mhm.
if I'd stayed where I was.
So you mentioned marketing, which we had talked about briefly before we started recording. So do you want to talk a little bit about one of the marketing challenges you have? Because even though you're a for-profit, some people in the community think you're a not-for-profit or a charitable
Yes,
organization.
that is true. I think that one of the things that amazes me about the community is the fact that there are so many outlays out there that support people that are in need,
Hmm.
right? And I think this is amazing and somewhat unique to the Jewish community. But as I pointed to you before we started a conversation, we are a provincially regulated financial institution.
Hmm.
We have investors, we have people who believed in the business plan that we put out there. Therefore, we have an obligation to run the credit union as a financial institution, and we have to provide returns to both our members and to our investors. So, one of the things that we struggled at the very beginning was to differentiate ourselves from one of these other institutions that I just mentioned that pretty much do some charitable and very valuable, ways in the community. I think after 9 months, people are starting to get, who we are and what we do, but we still get a lot of people communicating with us and really not understanding what a credit union is. To that
Hmm.
effort, we are bumping up our marketing efforts in terms of getting the message out there, creating a marketing strategy, branding strategy. And I hope that 2023, within the next few months, will solidify the differences between Lighthouse and some of the other institutions that I mentioned. And more importantly, for people to understand the benefits of investing, dealing, putting their financial affairs with Lighthouse, because at the end of the day, not only we help because we have different programs, we have different qualification processes, but one of the things we have written in our charter is that 10% of our profits will be given back to the community. One of the committees we
Interesting.
have within the credit union is a community engagement committee. And this committee, at the end of the year, obviously in a profitable scenario, will analyze which institutions should be receiving some of the support that Lighthouse will be giving back to the community.
Hmm.
So I'm hopeful and I'm very confident that 2023 will solidify this message. And by the end of this year, if we talk again, this will not be an issue
Hmm.
that I would raise. Is still ongoing.
But having been a marketer, brand strategist, whatever you want to call us, whatever fancy term, in my previous iteration, branding is such a tricky thing because there's the message the corporation wants to get out, but ultimately it's the consumers that decides what your brand says to them. So it's very
You are
tricky.
absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. I mean, you can spend a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy, but if members, consumers, society as a whole sees it differently, it doesn't matter,
Mhm.
right? It truly doesn't matter. So I agree with you. And that's why we've been careful and a little bit slow in doing, from a marketing perspective, what we need to do. because we want to make sure we got it right. The temptation was very easy to put our name in outdoors out there on
Mhm.
buses, running up some of the major streets within our geographical location. This is very
Bathurst.
tempting. Exactly. This is very tempting to do. Not necessarily the best ROI and not necessarily the best way to
Mhm.
communicate our brand and to talk about what we do.
Mhm. There might be some entrepreneurs or small businesses out there that are listening to this story, and they struggle to find capital, and they hear this and how these very successful people all came together, well capitalized, knew how to get other investors, and they're very jealous. But I think they might be missing a point that just because you have the capital doesn't mean that you don't have most of the same struggles that any other business starting out would have. Finding the right
Yes.
people, getting the customers in the door, just everything.
Yeah, capital is definitely, I mean, I would be naive if I said that capital is not important. It is absolutely fundamental, critical for any business to be successful. But I absolutely agree with you that if you don't have a sound business plan, if you don't have people with experience to, execute, to grow your business with networking, with, other businesses that they have done business with, that they can bring into the ecosystem of the credit union, or any other business for that matter. This would be why most new organizations fail,
Mhm.
right? Because they start with the idea that we are well capitalized, we can burn this, we have a year of cash to burn through, right?
Yeah.
And soon enough, you've burned through your 1 year of cash and your business is done, right?
Mhm.
I don't remember if my numbers are correct. I might be wrong, but I think it's something like more than 50%. I think the number is north of 50%, but more than 50% of startups fail within the first 12 to 24 months,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And one of the differentiators of Lighthouse is the capital, the strength of the board of directors, but the strength of management as well,
Mhm.
and the connections that we were able to very quickly bring into our ecosystem. So we are now connected with pretty much all the same partners that all major banks in Canada operate with.
Mhm.
No difference. Obviously, we are smaller, there's no question about that. But in terms of the partnership, that networks that we use, that we operate with, they are exactly the same of the major financial institutions in Canada.
So are you a brick and mortar setup, or are you mostly online?
Not at this moment. At this time, we are virtual.
Mhm.
Our website has a lot of capabilities. People can become members online. They can pay the membership online. They can invest online. They can do a mortgage application online. We, as I said, taking it slow. Bricks and mortar is a very big expense
Mhm.
for any institution. And we are planning on doing that. This is in our business plan, but I'm going to guess this is more for 2024 to have our first branch within the
Mhm.
Bathurst Lawrence area.
Mhm.
One of the things in the feasibility study that we did prior to our application uh, indicated was that there was a large number of people who wanted the ability to actually go into a physical branch, sit
Mhm.
down with someone, have discussions. I mean, the demographics today are such that there's a huge amount of people who virtual is everything. Don't tell me to go anywhere. I want to do everything from the comfort of my home.
Mhm.
But especially within the community, there's also a large number of people who believe in the old fashioned way of my financials are the most important thing for me. And I want to see eye to eye the people that I'm going to be investing with or getting services
Mhm.
from. And therefore, we know this is important. And it's probably going to come, I would say, sometime in 2024.
You use the term old fashioned, which made me chuckle. And I think if there's anything we've learned from the pandemic is that relationships are important. And even the financial people that I know from, the big banks and the investment companies that suddenly had to go virtual, they found that it was much harder to make sales or to keep clients because you don't have that face-to-face reality relationship. And that is so important.
Absolutely. I mean, we are here talking to each other. We have a video. We can see each other, but I believe, call me old-fashioned. I just said, call me old-fashioned. I don't have a problem including myself in this category. I still believe that nothing beats a face-to-face conversation, especially when
Mhm.
it comes to some significant discussions, whether it is personal or business. The ability to be in a room with someone, look at the other person, facial expression, body
Mhm.
language, a handshake, nothing beats that. And while we
Mhm.
have the technology to be present with each other, talking to each other, seeing each other, it is not the same. And
Mhm.
I think neuroscience will agree with me in that concept that this still is the most powerful way to connect.
When I was teaching business courses, I used to teach my students how to shake hands. Like they just don't understand how important that is, and not doing the limp wrist kind of thing. A firm shot, not crushing, but a firm handshake is a show of your character to many people.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. But I
So,
mean, the pandemic also taught us that we need to do what we need to do with what we have, right?
mhm,
And business adapted actually quite quickly to something that happened overnight. Literally, the lockdown was an overnight thing. Things were
mhm,
progressing, progressing, progressing. People were taking precaution, and then one day, lockdown,
mhm.
right? Nobody's coming to the office. The trains are not running. The buses are not running. The subway is not running. What do you do? And I am amazed at how fast small and big businesses adapted to this
Mhm.
new reality.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends at Great West Life, now Canada Life, because I grew up in Winnipeg, and a number of executives. And I think it took them 3 days to go virtual. Like that is a massive, massive company and get people working from
Absolutely,
home.
absolutely. I mean, it was incredible. It was incredible. Now, getting people to come back to the office has proven to be a little bit more difficult.
Mm. And I can see both sides of the coin on that. You know, uh, especially if you've got to work with childcare and things like that, because those services have also shrunk, and there's
Uh-huh.
less of it available. So I understand.
Absolutely.
I wasn't thrilled.
I think the hybrid is the best way to go. Gives
Mhm.
people the flexibility that they need, especially if you have a young family, right? It gives them the flexibility. But I also believe that the information sharing in the office, the ability to exchange
Mhm.
information and experiences also is very important. So I'm a firm believer of the hybrid solution that gives both parties something that is very valuable for them.
Mhm. That institutional culture and knowledge that can, in some cases, go back a few decades, is
Absolutely.
just it's gold, and that'll never get captured in a computer system.
No, I agree with you.
So, can we talk a little business now?
Absolutely. My pleasure.
So, is the model of the credit union to be primarily a mortgage lender and secondarily an investment structure, or is there something else in there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to call it different phases, right? We are
Mhm.
now in phase one, which is launch and stabilization of business. And phase one is deposit taking
Mhm.
through GICs and soon high interest savings accounts. And on the other side of the spectrum, giving out residential loans. And we are also giving a small percentage of commercial loans as well.
Mhm.
So phase one is the build, the stabilization of the business, which has on one end the deposit taking, and on the other end, the lending through residential and a small portion of commercial mortgages. Mortgages is an anchor product, no matter how big or small your institution is. Mortgages are an anchor product. And within the community, a very important component, because in today's day and age, when you have a community with a large portion of business for self or entrepreneurs, these individuals are having a much harder time getting financing in a traditional manner. When things are wonderful, when the economy is booming, when inflation is non-existent, anybody can get financing anywhere. When things are tighter, as they are today, your traditional bank will get much more restrictive when it comes to lending. And the criteria, the qualification becomes much harder, especially if you are a non-vanilla customer. What do I mean by non-vanilla? You are not a salaried with a pay stub and a T4 and an NOA that shows exactly how much you make. We have programs for non-traditional customers, which the community has a large number of people in that category. We have qualification processes that balances the risk, but at the same time recognizes the need that one of the things that we are doing differently is supporting individuals like that. So mortgages, while being an anchor product for anyone, is a key product for us because it serves the financial component, but it also serves the community component. And I am proud to tell you that between June of last year, when we started our operations, and as of today, March 31st, we have 9 months under our belt, we have already funded north of $125 million of residential mortgages. And out of the $125 million, I would say that a good $40 to $45 million were directly impacting members of the community.
Interesting. So in Toronto speak, for those of you who aren't familiar with Toronto housing prices, 125 million is about 8 houses. It's pricey.
Yeah,
here,
you know what?
so.
We've seen a little bit of a price stabilization, to use a very gentle term. Some markets have seen depreciation of the high values that we saw in 2021 and 2022. That has offset a little bit of the higher interest rates. So interest rates are higher, but the price has gone down. So it has offset a little bit the increase of interest rates. Our average mortgage, just to give you a sense, and to the listeners, our average mortgage is around $800,000. That is our average residential mortgage.
Okay. So do you see interest rates continuing to get bumped up for a while, or is it just too hard to say?
One person said to me once, get 10 economists in one room and you're going to get 10 different answers, right? From everything that we monitor, from everything that we hear, and from everything that we learn from everything that goes out from both the government and the private sector, it looks like the government is taking a pause in the pace of increase. So right now, we don't foresee the continuation. Am I saying that rates are going to come down immediately? No. What I'm saying is that what we are seeing is a pause. Meanwhile, where up until now, every quarter, every couple of months, rates were going up. Now there's been a pause, and the language from the government and from the federal, from finance minister is also pause, right? So how long the pause will be before things start to come down, I think that is a very tricky question, because it involves not only macroeconomics, but it also involves macro geopolitics, right?
For sure.
We're in a world today that something happens across the world, it will definitely have an impact on us. So this is the new reality of the financial services, right? It is not unique to a country. You have to take the geopolitical of the world into account when making your forecasting and your predictions.
Mhm. So, looking at the future, a few years out, do you possibly see your board also organizing a sort of venture capital system for the community, or seed financing that,
Yeah, I mean,
because a
I
lot of
think
them
the
have to be entrepreneurs.
absolutely. The great thing about us is that we truly, as I said a few moments ago, have a blank page in front of us, right?
Mhm.
There's so many things that we can and probably will do. I mean, phase two, we are looking at, potentially issuing credit cards,
Wow.
looking into personal loans, educational loans. There's a lot of members of the community that spend a significant amount of money on education, right?
Oh,
So there's
yes.
so many things that we are looking at that will definitely engage. That's why we're doing it into phases, right? But we need
Mhm.
to make sure that we're running a very stable financial institution before we start, taking the next steps and going into the next phases. Again, very tempting to go out there and say, hey, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. That
Mhm.
has proven to be the Achilles heel of many of financial institutions who try to do too much too fast.
Mhm.
And we are definitely, in today's day and age, especially, taking a very cautious approach to make sure that everything is working properly, that the numbers are good, and then we go into the next phase. But I don't want to give the impression that I'm cutting around your question. There's a
Mhm.
number of different things we have in our plans to look at and to potentially launch in the next few years. And this is one of them for sure.
Cool. So, we're almost out of time. So we've got about 2 minutes. And I wonder if you could tell me about the story of how people keep confusing you with the famous director Stanley Kubrick.
Yes, very, very quickly. The family is the same. The family was in Europe, and the family was trying to escape the horrors that was coming in the 30s and 40s
Hmm.
in Europe. The people who left early was able to get into the US. The people who took a little bit longer was no longer able to, they were no longer able to get into the US. So
Hmm.
they decided to go to South America, to Brazil in my case specifically. And in Brazil, at that particular time, in the 30s and 40s, the letter K was not a letter in the alphabet.
It's
So whatever the
fascinating.
immigration officer heard, Kubrick, he automatically assumed, said, "Oh, this is a
Hmm.
C," right? Because there was no K. And obviously, for the U.S., the letter K was also was always a part of the alphabet. The funny story, just to wrap this up, is that many years ago, when my dad was still alive, he decided to write to Stanley Kubrick just to talk to him about his admiration of these movies and everything else.
Hmm.
As you probably know, Stanley was an odd character.
Hmm.
And he sent my dad a book with some of his pictures of his movies and one line. As you turn the first page, there was one line, and it said, "Dear Isaac, thank you very much for your note. Not interested in having a relationship. Best of luck, Stanley."
Wow.
So that was, but my dad always treasured that book
Hmm.
immensely. But that was the extent of the relationship between our families.
So I'm guessing you are not the corporate video maker now. You don't have that talent.
No, I wish, I wish.
Hmm.
Very hard to inherit the talents, from that side of the family.
Hmm. Well, Michelle, this has been a fantastic conversation. I thank you so much for being on here, and I hope we get to do a round two at some point and find out where your story ends up going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. I hope that I've given you and the listeners a good sense of what Lighthouse Credit Union is. And I'll be more than happy to be back to continue sharing, hopefully, our success story.
Awesome. And thank you to everybody for tuning in to the Dead Man Walking podcast. Please like, subscribe, share, check out Lighthouse Credit Union. Oh, what's your website, please?
Lighthousecu.ca.
Great. So you can get a hold of Michelle, maybe not personally, but you can certainly get a hold of people at the credit union who can help you with your financial needs. Thank you again and have a great week.
Thank you.